Heavy light pierces the fog, lying dark and thick along California's Route 79. Just past 3 a.m., an emergency call brings Patrolman Steve Prolesnik to a field alongside the road and the scorched remains of a solitary car.
It was on its roof, as I recall. It had been on fire. The female driver had been thrown loose from the accident.
The woman lies face down, some 15 feet from her vehicle. Prolesnik checks her vitals but gets nothing.
They got her name and address, Alma Napier, out of Nuevo area, which is locally here.
Alma Napier had been shooting pool earlier that night at the Winchester Inn, some 10 miles from the spot her car left the road. Although an autopsy reveals no signs of alcohol, the death is chalked up to an all-too-common scenario. A single driver, late at night, coming home from a bar, loses control of her car and dies. In 1996, John Nakshane is a parole agent for San Bernardino. His job? Keep track of high-risk sex offenders who decide to make his beat their new home. Richard Craig Miller is one of John's cases. In 1982, Miller was convicted of repeatedly molesting his stepdaughter. Now he's out of prison and living in Riverside. Nakshane meets with Miller and gets a bad feeling.
He was too good, too perfect. Something was missing.
Nakshane requests surveillance on Miller. Special Agent Steve Utter pulls the job.
We followed him from town to town. He had a young male juvenile with him for some reason, which was a concern to us. And once we completed the surveillance, we had enough violations based on his companion, the young juvenile male, and the fact that he was obviously living somewhere other than what he had registered. We had enough to arrest him for parole violations.
Under California law, Craig Miller's parole violation could have been construed as a third felony offense, resulting in a mandatory life sentence. At trial, however, the judge strikes 2 of Miller's prior felony convictions and sentences him to 7 years for a violation of the sex offender registration laws, a sentence that does not sit easy with Steve Utter. Steve Utter decides to take a final look at Craig Miller's file. In the back of the file, Utter happens upon a letter written by Craig Miller's ex-wife and the mother of the girl Miller had originally molested, a woman named Barbara.
She wrote a letter to the judge trying to explain to him just how vicious Craig Miller is and that if any person deserves a life sentence, Craig Miller does. And it was when I reviewed that letter that I found information that implicated him in a homicide.
Steve Utter tracks down Craig Miller's ex, who tells him about her life with Miller. Barbara tells Detective Utter that Miller held her at gunpoint and began to tell about the night he left a bar and followed a woman in his truck.
He said he followed her, ramming her car until she ran off the road. And he said that the car flipped and he got out. And what he told me was he went up to the car and that she had her arm hanging out saying, "Help me, help me." And he reached in his pocket, took out his cigarette lighter, and he goes like that and lit it.
According to Barbara, Miller believed the victim's name to be Naomi. He also claimed he had a companion in the vehicle and provided her first name as well.
He gave her the name of someone who was there with him, just a first name, and described her as a barmaid at the Winchester Inn. She wasn't familiar with Linda, but she did remember the first name.
18 years later, Barbara's story gives Steve Utter's investigation some legs. Rising from the dust of Highway 79 is a relic from California's past. A former roadhouse bar named the Winchester Inn. Steve Utter believes the barmaid he's looking for once worked here at the Winchester. A discussion with the old owners turns up a possible name, Linda Parrott.
This particular incident happened in March of 1980. It resulted in the death of a woman. Is this sounding any more familiar to you? Yes.
I don't remember if he mentioned car accident or I had mentioned something about a car accident, but anyway, the word car accident, and I knew. Craig Miller. And then I said, Craig Miller, because that was the name, that was the one thing that had stuck with me for 18 years, was that name.
As Linda Parrott talks, the memories return. and Steve Utter's case finally begins to take shape. On the green felt of a pool table, the seeds of murder are sown. Watered with whiskey and beer, they reach out and begin to take root. The first flower of trouble appears when Linda Parrott hooks up in a game with a young woman she doesn't know, a woman named Alma Napier.
She didn't like the way I was shooting pool. In other words, she was getting beat, and she was getting upset over it, and she kept at me about the pool game, and it's like, I don't really want to get into a fight tonight, so I just left the table and went back up to the bar.
Craig Miller waits at the bar, along with another man named Mark Ackerman. Parrott, Miller, and Ackerman have a few more beers, and a little past midnight, the three leave the bar. Linda and Craig get into his pickup. Ackerman gets into his own car. Both cars head out a dark road towards Highway 79 and Mark Ackerman's house.
As we were going up Simpson Road, we noticed that somebody was behind us with their headlights off. So Craig went on up the road and he flipped a U-turn to where his headlights were shining on the car, and we saw it was her.
Her is Alma Napier, sitting in her car, apparently waiting for the two cars to pass by. The caravan of three cars heads out onto Highway 79. After some jockeying, Alma Napier finds herself stuck behind Mark Ackerman's car with Craig Miller's pickup in her rearview mirror. That's when Miller begins to accelerate.
He just started hitting the back end of her car, but their speeds were staying even. So no matter how fast she went, he stayed right behind her and just kept tapping the back end of her car.
For 5 miles, the game continues. Taps on the back of Alma Napier's car, each a little harder than the last. Each delivered at speeds approaching 50 miles an hour. Parrott remembers those final moments, sitting in the pickup, watching Miller's hatred for women find its way to the surface.
And after she got in front of him, then you could see the adrenaline pumping. I could see the veins in the side of his neck just throbbing. And that's when it became intense, because it was like, well, who in the hell does she think she is?
A little less than 10 miles from the Winchester Inn, Highway 79 takes a dip down and to the right. As the caravan of three cars approaches the curve, Craig Miller digs his bumper a final time into Napier's car. Timing is perfect. Alma Napier has no hope of keeping her tires on the road.
When he hit the car, all I saw was her fly over to the right side of the road. She hit the dirt, and you could just see the car just flipping.
Inside the pickup, Linda screams while Miller pulls over. They both walk down into the ditch. The night is thick with the smell of gasoline. Miller scratches open a lighter and tosses it into the overturned vehicle.
But all of a sudden, the inside of the car just went foof, just went into a ball of flame. And when it did that, I turned my head this way, and when I turned my head to the left, I saw Alma laying over in the dirt.
Miller drags Parrott back to the pickup and the couple drives off, leaving Alma Napier lying dead in a field. Parrott's eyewitness account coincides precisely with the story Craig Miller had told his ex-wife, and the scant physical evidence available from the wreckage. Miller is arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Unlike his sex offenses, Miller this time gets no break from the system. He is found guilty and sentenced to a term of 15 years to life. Look hard enough along Highway 79, and you can still find a few hints of tragedy. A drain pipe scarred by paint from Alma Napier's car, and a barbed wire fence torn asunder where her vehicle finally came to rest. Much like this stretch of highway, the women who had the misfortune of meeting Craig Miller walk away less than whole. No amount of prison time will undo the damage Miller managed to inflict, erase the scars, or banish the memories.